Okay guys, welcome back. Now in this session, we are going to perform integration of UI and the service layer. So far we have done the implementation of UI as well as service layer. But how do we can find the UI and the service layer? So we need to perform some of the integration steps by which we can do the integration between user interface as well as the service layer. So let's understand what I am talking about. Guys, this is our architecture diagram on which we are working on. And so far we have developed the user interface as well as we have developed the service layer, and that is communicating with the SharePoint. So this connection is already being done. Now this part of the code is remaining. From user interface, if I want to perform any of the operations like create, read, update, delete, then we must have to integrate the user interface with service layer, and this is what it is representing, this arrow. So far we have just created different layers and which is working in silos. So service layer is having their own functionality, but it is not performing anything which is coming from the user interface. On the other hand, we have also designed this user interface where it is also working in silos. There is no connection between this user interface as well as this service layer. So now we will perform the integration step which will make the connection between user interface and the service layer. So let's look into the steps. What are the steps we are going to perform to achieve this? So guys, these are the steps which we have to perform to integrate UI and service layer. So these are the tasks we must have to perform to achieve the integration between user interface and service layer. So the first step is create model folder. So let's do it. So guys, we will come back to our Visual Studio Code, and over here we will select this one, and then we need to create a folder. So I'm going to create a folder over here that is called models, and within that I'm going to create a file called ilistitem.ts and which holds an interface. So I'm going to write export interface ilist item, and within that I will keep all those fields which we want to bring from the SharePoint. So first I am going to mention that ID. So ID is going to be the string. It should be number. I will write number over here. Then I will mention that we have title. Make sure that you are putting I capital over here. ID. Title is going to be the string. We need to write a string over here. Then we have email. If you remember, we are having email field. Then we are having batch, which is also of a string type. And last we are having level of knowledge. So our model will contain this information, and we are calling this model as ilistitem. So this is our second step. First step was create the model folder, and in the second step we need to create this ilistitem.ts file, and within that we have to define this interface. So now we are done with the two steps. Now let's look into the third step. So in the third step we need to create a state file that will be used to extend in the React component. So let's do it. So to perform this step we need to go inside the components folder, and over here we need to click on new file, and I am going to copy the name of this one. So make sure that you are going to take this props file name, and over here you will click on this and paste it over here, and make sure that you are going to change the name over here. That is going to be state.ts. So this is going to be my state file. So in this file what we are going to keep? We are going to keep the state information which our component will hold. So to do that we need to first create an interface. So how we will create it? We will type export interface, and I will provide the name. I will copy the same name over here which we have given. So make sure that you are copying this and paste it over here, and within that I'm going to keep three kind of information. The first information I am going to call it as status, and this is going to be a string type, because this status field holds the information what is going on inside the component, so that if anytime if we are performing create operation, so it will display that message that okay, we have performed create operation, read operation, delete operation. So whatever the action which we are taking on the component, so this state field will display that message. This is first thing. Another thing, it will holds the data of the list. So that is our list item. I am going to tell that it will holds the list item information which is of type the model which we have created, ilistitem. If you remember, we have created this one, and the moment you will add it, it got added over here, and that is one of the feature of this Visual Studio Code. And if your Visual Studio Code is not behaving like that, you have to write this one. Anyway, so to use this ilistitem, you must have to import it, and import it from the models folder. Now next, what the component holds? It holds the all items. So where do it holds all item? It holds in an array. So we must have to tell that list items, and which is of type I list item, and that is an array. So it holds the array of values which is of type I list item. So within that we can keep all the record. We have created an interface that gets extended to our component so that our component will maintain these three information inside it. So we are done with step 3. So now let's proceed further. Now we need to perform task number 4, where we need to introduce the context and the list name inside the components props. So let's do it. So to perform task 4, we need to go inside the props file over here, and first we need to delete all these. So over here I will delete all these properties over here, and over here I need to introduce a property called context, and which is of type, if you remember that we are having web part context. The moment you press enter, it got automatically imported over here from this. Now next, another one, we need to introduce another property called list name, which is of type string. So we are done with the step 4. So now let's proceed further and perform step 5. Now in the step 5, we need to create a state object which is inside the component to hold the state of the component. So how we will do that? Let's look into that. On the task number 5, we need to go inside the tsx file over here, and over here we need to go to the class and make sure that prior to writing this step, you must have to extend the state interface over here. To do that, I need to copy this line of code, and I will remove this bracket, and over here I will paste it and make sure that I am going to remove this one, and it is going to be state. Over here it is complaining, so make sure that you are going to add it. So to import the state interface, we need to go upside, and over here we will copy this line of code and paste it over here, and make sure that we are going to tell state over here, and this is coming from the state. So that's it. Now we have added the state interface over here. We can come back over here. Now next we need to introduce the constructor over here. So to introduce the constructor, we need to write code constructor, and within that we need to specify props, which is of type props, which we have created, that is IERROUIWP NPWP props. So this is the naming convention which we have given initially, if you remember. That is nothing but an abbreviation of this project. Next we need to specify state over here, and that is of type, if you remember that is of type IERR, and you can select this one. Now we need to define the body of the constructor, and within this body of the constructor we need to specify the state. So over here you will see that it is complaining about some error. So why it is complaining? Because we need to pass the value to the parent component with the help of super, because we are using the React component that is the parent of our component, and that parent is expecting some of the value. So how do we will pass it? So we need to use the keyword super over here, and over here we need to specify props. So now you see that it stopped complaining. Now this is the initial prerequisite prior to step 5. So we need to perform all these 2 steps. Now I am going to introduce the step 5. So for this I am going to tell that this dot state equal to, and within that I am going to tell about what are the information my component will hold. So the first information, it holds the status, and initial value is ready. So I'm telling that whenever my component will load, the status will show ready message into the component. Now next I want that my component will hold blank array, which is of type list items. So I will tell list items over here, and that is of array, blank array. Now the next, what we are having, list item. So this will holds the values of the record, and what are those values? If you remember that we have created, so we need to tell that ID, it holds the information ID, which is 0. This is the default value. Then it will holds the title blank. Initially whenever it initialize, it will holds the blank string. Now email will also be blank. I will tell email is also blank. Then batch is also blank. So all these information is initially blank value, and last we are having level of knowledge. So once it is being done, so we have completed our step number 5, and that is task number 5. So now let's proceed further and let's look into step number 6. So now we are going to perform task number 6, that is our step 6, where we need to create PNP service object to use with UI layer inside component constructor. So this is the glue which is basically going to connect our UI layer to service layer. So let's look into that, what we are going to do in this step. So first I am going to create a class variable that is called private_sp, and which is of type PNP services. And over here it is complaining about this class. So let's import it first. I will come over here and I will write import, and this is coming from, if you remember that we have created the folder. So first we need to mention that dot slash services slash PNP services, and from the PNP services I'm going to tell PNP services over here. So now you will see that it stopped complaining. So this is our first step in task 6. So now next we need to create the object of this PNP service. So let's do it. Over here I will tell this dot underscore sp equal to new PNP services. You remember that this PNP service is expecting a context. You will see it over here. When we defined it, then over here you will see that within the constructor it is expecting a context object that we need to pass it whenever we want to use this particular class. For this reason we need to pass the context object. To do that we need to specify over here this dot props dot context. So now from where this context is coming, it is coming from this props. Here we have defined in the step 4 while introducing new properties, and we have defined over here context, and which is of type web part context. So with this step we have completed the task 6. Put semicolon over here, save it. So now we have seen that from where this context is coming, but one question over here is from where this props is getting the context. We have just declared the context object over here which is of type web part context, but from where the value will come. So let's look into that. The value will come from the webpart.ts file. Over here you will find that it is complaining some of the error, and in this place we need to define the context object. So how we will define it, let's look into that. So from this place I'm going to remove all these things because it is not required. This is coming with the boilerplate code, and this is the place where actual web part code is existing. So here I will tell that context property, this is going to be the context property, and the value is coming from this dot context, and within that we are going to also specify the list name. If you remember that we are having another props called list name. So from where the value will come for this particular property, again from this place we are going to pass the list name from this place. So over here we are going to tell list name, and then we will specify the value, and our list is even registration. So this way we can pass the value from the web part to our component. This is our component, and these are the value which we are passing to our component. So now all these values will hold inside the component, and which is coming through the props. So now let's proceed further. So over here I'm going to remove all these line of codes because it is not required, and let's save it. So guys, now we have completed task number 6, that is step 6. Now let's proceed further. This task has multiple subtasks involved over here, so make sure that you are jotting down all those points. So now we are going to perform task number 7, where we need to create selection object to bind with detail list control. So what it is actually, so let's understand it first. To understand task number 7, you have to understand this diagram, or say to understand this picture. So this picture is the final output of our program. So what will happen with the task number 7, we want to create a selection object so that whenever we will select any of the record, for example if we select the record number 3, then the data of the record number 3 will gets populated over here. So for that reason we need to perform the task number 7. So how we will do it, let's look into that. To perform task number 7, we need to first create a class variable, and that is called underscore selection, and which is of type selection. So this is the selection object, and with the help of this object we are going to achieve the functionality which we have discussed now. So now we have declared a class variable which is of type selection, and now I am going to define it. So here we have declared it. Now I am going to define it over here. So to do that I am going to tell this dot underscore selection equal to new selection, and within that I am going to write an anonymous function, and that anonymous function will set the current state of our component, and because of that current state the functionality which we are expecting that we will achieve. So what I mean to say that you will understand after writing this code. So let's do that. I'm going to tell that on selection change, over here we need to specify parenthesis, and then we need to define the body over here, and within this I'm going to tell this dot set a state for the state, and what the value our state is having, it has list item is dot on item selection changed. So this function we are going to define now. So now over here you will see that it is complaining about this because we need to define this particular function, and with the help of this function we are getting the latest value of the list item. Now over here you are seeing that it is complaining about this function because we haven't defined it. We are going to define it, and with the help of this function we are able to get the value for this particular state variable, and then once it is being set, then we will get the latest value of these fields. So as you know that list item holds these information where we are having title, that is username, email, select batch, select level of knowledge. The moment anyone choose this particular row or any of the row, these value get set over here, and that is setting through the state variable. And within the state variable where we have kept these data, we have kept inside an object, and that is called as list item, and that is what this list item is representing. So now let's create on item selection change. So I'm going to write private underscore on item selection changed, going to return type any, and over here I'm going to tell that const selected item equal to this dot underscore selection dot get selection, and the value which exists at 0th position and which is of type I list item. And once it gets selected, then whatever the value it holds which is of type I list item. So it is complaining about this. So let me add this one. So now once it is being added, we need to return this, return that is selected item. So what this particular line of code is doing, whenever anyone selecting any of the record, so whatever the value exists within this particular field, that value gets populated inside this variable, that is selected item, and which is of type I list item. And once it is being selected, then it is returning it, and where it is returning it is returning to the list item state object. And over here it is complaining we need to make sure that putting D over here. So once it is being done, we are perfect. So now we have done with the step 7. So now let's proceed further. So guys, now we are going to perform task 8, that is create generic bind function that will be used to refresh UI with current component state. So what actually it means? So let's create the generic bind function. So guys, to perform task number 8, we need to write private async. We need to write a function which is of type async, and we are going to call it as call and bind detail list. And this particular function has one parameter which is called message. So this message parameter holds the information about the latest status. Whenever we perform any kind of operation within the component, then that particular status will be displayed within this message. So I'm going to tell that it is of type string, and this function is a promise function where we will return the promise object. So I'm going to tell that promise any, and now within that I'm going to write await this dot underscore sp dot. If you remember that these are the functions from the services, so this is directly coming from our service. I'm going to use this one, and within that you remember that what is the parameter it has the list name as well as it has the columns. And over here we need to specify the argument to the function, but I'm seeing over here we have specified columns as well. So, and let's go to those services, let's verify it. When we designed it, we have specified over here 2 parameters, but one thing I noticed that this column is not being used anywhere. So it is better to remove this particular column from this place and save it. And now we will go back over here, and now we will see that we need to just provide the list name. And if you remember that from where we are getting the list name, this is from the props. So props over here, then we need to specify list name, and this list name is coming from the prop. So now once we hit the endpoint, it will return us the response. In that response I am going to capture inside list items variable, and that I am going to set inside the state variable of our component. So for that reason I am going to write this line of code, this dot set a state. And if you remember that where we are having our data, that is inside an array, and what is the name of that array is list items, and over here I am assigning it like list items. Another thing I am going to specify over here status message. So once we do that, we are going to also pass the message over here from which operation this call and bind detail list function gets called. So now we are done with the task 8. Save it. Now we are going to perform task number 9. So let's look into that. So at the task where we need to create a wrapper function that will perform create, read, update, delete operations. So how we will do it? Let's look into that. So in the task 9, we need to write the wrapper function. So first I will write the wrapper function for create item. So let's do it. I will write private async create item. If you remember that I have been using this underscore whenever I am using private. It is one of the convention in industry. You have to follow underscore in front of the function name. So it represents the private function. Anyway, let's proceed further. And then we need to specify over here. It is of type promise. And over here within that I am going to specify that is of type any. And now let's start writing it. If you remember that we have created a service called create item. If you go inside that, you will see it over here. So this is what we are going to call, and this we are going to call with our PNP service object, and that is this dot underscore sp. So to call that object we need to specify await this dot underscore sp dot create item. And what are the things it expect? It expect list name as well as the item object. So how we will do that? Let's look into that. So list name, you know that from where it is coming. It is coming from the props. So let's write props dot list name. This is our first argument. Now the second argument, from where it is coming? So it is the object which we have created inside the state. This is the one we need to specify over here. So how we will specify that? We need to tell this dot state dot list item. And what this list item holds? This list item holds whenever user enter any of the information inside the form which we have designed in UI, that data it is capturing inside this state variable. So what I mean to say that, let's understand. This is the form which we have designed when we are performing our UI layer activity, and whatever the user provide the data in this field, that data we will get inside the state. And what are the things we are having? We are having title, that is username, email, batch, level of knowledge, and that is what we are capturing. And that is we are capturing inside the state values, and that is what we are passing over here. So once it is being done, then we need to write dot then, and what response we will get once it is being executed. If you remember that, if you go to the PNP services, it is returning the ID. So over here you need to press enter, then dot then, and within that we are going to capture the ID, and over here I will mention ID over here, and then I'm going to define the body, and this we will call this call and bind detail list. So let's do it. I'm going to tell that this dot call and bind list, call and bind detail list. And what kind of parameter this function expecting? It is expecting the message. So I'm going to write a message over here, new item created successfully with ID. And what is the ID? The ID we are getting over here. So that ID we need to specify that. So let's specify the ID over here. Over here you should mention plus ID. That's it. So guys, we have done with our first wrapper function, that is for create item. Next we will write the wrapper function for read functionality. So I will tell private async, and this is going to be the read list, and then it is going to return the promise object. I will mention promise any. Over here I will call the call and bind detail list. Why? Because internally it is calling the read operations only, that is the get item. It should be get items. So I did a mistake over here. Why not? We will change it because it is returning multiple values, so it should be get items. And make sure that you are also changing over here, so it should be get items. Save it, and over here also you should make sure that you are changing it. So that's it, we have to do the changes there. Now I will come over here, and over here I will mention await this dot call bind detail list, and the message I want to print items loaded successfully. So now we are done with the wrapper function for reading the list item, or so now we are done with the read operation. So now let's proceed further and write the wrapper function for update functionality. So how we will do that? Let's look into that. So I will write private async update item. This is also promise return type. So I will mention promise any. Over here I will start writing await this dot sp dot update item. This is the endpoint, and what argument this particular endpoint expecting? It is expecting the list name, item ID, and item object. So let's do it. So over here I'm going to mention this dot props dot list name. So next we need to specify the ID. So ID we will get from the state. So let's write this dot state dot list item dot ID. Now the third argument we are having over here is the objects, the values. So from where we will get it? We will get it from the state itself. So here we will mention that title we are getting from this dot state dot list item dot title. Then we are going to update the value for email as well. Email, copy this one. Better you should copy all this line of code. 4 times you have to copy. Now over here it is going to be the email. This is going to be batch. This is also going to be batch. And over here this is going to be the level of knowledge, and this is also going to be the level of knowledge. So what are these values are? So guys, how it works, whenever any user select any of the item over here, it get populated in this text boxes or drop down boxes. User get all the current data, and if he want to change it, he need to provide the value over here, and once he will do that, then it will go and sit inside the state variable, and from that state variable we are capturing the information, and that is what we are passing to the update functionality, or say update endpoint. And that is what we are doing over here. So once we get this, we need to write dot then, and over here also, if you remember that, we are returning over here item ID as well. So I will use that ID. I will tell that ID, and over here within that I'm going to call this dot call and bind detail list. I'm going to use the template string. So 2 backticks will give us the template string. So what it do, within that we can write the string as well as the dynamic values both. If you want to learn about this thing, I have a course, Mastering Modern JavaScript. It is one of the prerequisite course prior to doing the SPFX course. So you can search for my course step by step, Mastering Modern JavaScript. Anyway, let's proceed further. And over here, I will mention item dollar curly braces start and close, and within that I'm going to specify ID over here, and I will mention updated successfully, and then we are done with the wrapper function for update item. So let's save it. Now let's proceed further and let's write the wrapper function for delete operation. Let's do it. For that I'm going to tell private async underscore delete item. The return type is going to be promise, and over here I need to mention any. For delete operation I'm going to handle this within the try catch block, because sometime if we are getting an error, so we need to catch it and we need to display the error inside the console. So to do that I'm going to use try catch block, and within try block I'm going to write await this dot underscore sp dot delete item, and over here I will mention what it is expecting. It is expecting a list name, so I will specify over here this dot props dot list name, and another argument is item ID. So we need to grab the item ID from the state, so we need to tell this dot state dot list item dot ID. It's complaining about ID over here. It should be ID. Once item gets deleted, we need to print the message. So how we will do that? We need to call then, and then we need to call like this. Over here we need to write an anonymous function, and the body of the anonymous function contains this dot set state, and I am going to have the status state, and over here I will specify the message over here, item deleted successfully. So now we are done with the wrapper functions. Now next very important thing is that, so whenever any of the operations happen on the component, that must be reflect to the component. So how we will achieve this? To do that, we need to use the React lifecycle method, that is the component did mount method. Within that method, we need to call this function so that it will have the latest state of the component. So let's write it. So to do that, I am going to come over here and I will tell component did mount, and over here I will call this dot call and bind detail list, and this time I'm going to tell that record loaded. So guys, we have done 80% of the exercises at step number 9, that is task 9. So now we are remaining with 20% of step. So what actually it is? Let's look into that. So guys, we have created all the wrapper functions so far. So now we need to bind those wrapper function with all these buttons. So whenever user will click on these buttons, it will perform the respective task. So let's do it. So to do that, I need to go to the button section, and over here we are having 4 buttons. So for that, I am going to write, to bind the wrapper function with the button, I am going to write the event, that is on click event. I will tell on click, and over here I need to write, I'm going to pass the event E over here, and within that I'm going to call my wrapper function. So let's write this dot create item. So now we have binded our wrapper function with the create button. Repeat the same thing for read, update and delete create button. So now I'm going to repeat the same for all of my button. I will copy this line of code, paste it over here, and I will paste it over here, and again I will paste it over here, and I will make sure that I'm going to change this wrapper function reference over here. This is for read, so I call read list, and this is for, it should be read item. I have given a wrong name. It should be read item. Let me change there. So it should be read item. Read item. Yeah. Now over here I will change the reference for the update also. I will call it as underscore update item, and this is for the delete item. I will call the delete item. So now we have binded our button with the wrapper function. So whenever any of the button will be clicked, it will perform the respective operation. So guys, now we have completed this part of the code where we have binded the wrapper function with the button. So now we will write the code. With the help of that code, the detail lists gets populated. So currently we are populating the static value. If you remember, in our UI session we have populated with the static value. So let's write the code to load the dynamic value inside the details list. So to do that, I will go to the detail list over here, and I will delete this line of code because I want the dynamic value. So how I will get the dynamic value? I will tell this dot state dot list items. So this line of code will give us the dynamic value. Now next thing I am going to add over here is the functionality for the selection. So whenever any of the record gets selected, it performs certain operation, and that operation we have already defined. If you remember, at the beginning of this session we have defined this selection object. So I am going to use it now. So I am going to write over here, there is something called selection. This is the selection property of this details list component, and which is expecting this object. So I'm going to tell curly braces this dot underscore selection. So now we have completed task 9, where we have created the wrapper function and we have also binded with the buttons. Now the next task I'm going to perform is the task 10, where I will bind the state with the UI controls. So let's perform this task, but before performing this step we have to understand it. So guys, in this step we are going to write the code whenever any user is specifying any values within these controls, so that values will sit inside the controls. So how we will do that? Let's look into that. Now to perform the step 10, we need to write the following line of code, and for that I am going inside the text field for the username, and over here I will mention value equal to, and within that I am going to specify this dot state dot list item dot title. So this will hold the value from the title field of the list item. So with this line of code, whatever the value which user will insert, that is going to reside inside the state of the components. Next we need to specify the on change event. So whenever user will type any kind of information inside the text box, so that will going to reside inside the state of the component. So for this reason I am going to write on change, and to write this I need to write like this e comma new value. So whenever user write anything, that is going to reside inside the new value, and then I need to write the body of it, and over here I will mention this dot set state. Make sure that this is an arrow function, and over here I will mention state. This is going to be an arrow function over here, and within that I will mention state dot list item dot title equal to new value, and then I need to specify state. Save it. So now we have done with the user field control. Let's repeat the same for other fields. So I'm going to copy these line of codes over here, and I will use it over here also. Control V, and make sure that we are going to change the value over here. It is for email. It is for email. So now we are done with the email. Now let's proceed for the drop down, and for the drop down I am going to write over here selected key equal to this dot state dot list item dot batch. I am going to keep for default value. So default value I am going to keep the same one. Copy this one. Now for the on change event, I am going to use the same functionality which I have used in other controls. So copy this one and paste it over here. So with these line of code, whatever the value that user will type, that is going to capture inside the state of the component. So over here it is complaining email. So I am going to tell that it is going to be batch, and new value is going to be text. So I will convert it as a text, then it will accept it. Now let's proceed for the repeat the same for other drop down, that is for level of knowledge. Copy this one, come over here, paste it, make sure that you are going to change it to the level of knowledge, and then over here also you should specify the same level of knowledge. Make sure that you are going to change this one, level of knowledge. Now we are done with all the controls. So over here we have performed this exercise where whatever the user will type over here, that is going to reside inside the state of the component. Now the last one is remaining, this record loaded one. So let's do it. So this is basically the div control. This is basically the div where we are displaying the message. So let's do it. How we will do that? In the message we are displaying through the status state. So we will come over here and we will tell that this dot state dot status. So whatever the status we have, that we are going to display over here. So guys, we have done with our all the development step. Now let's test it. Gulp build, let's build it first, then we will test inside our hosted workbench. So now it has started the build process. So build is completed. Next we need to write gulp. So minus minus no browser enter. So now the server is started. So let's go to the hosted workbench. So guys, I am inside the hosted workbench and let's add the web part over here, and I will select this web part and you will see it over here. We are getting all these records which is existing inside the list. So let's verify it. I will come over here. I will go to the event registration list and you will see it over here. We are getting all the data, and this is the record which we are getting over here. So now if we will select any of the record, it gets populated over here. So let's select this one and you will see that it is gets populated. So now we will test our functionality which we have developed so far. So first we will test create item. So let's refresh it and I will write a new entry. I'm going to tell that Shiva is going to be the Shiva at abc.com, and over here I will select is going to attend batch 1 is a beginner, and I will click on create and you will see that it has inserted a new record with ID 34, and you will see that it has, and you will see that it is coming over here. Now let's perform first update operation. Read I will show you later. So for update, Shiva decided to attend the batch 2. So he will change to batch 2 and over here he will click on update. It throws an error. Why? Because we haven't selected this record. So let's select it and now try it. Now you will come over here, select batch 2. Now update, and now you will see that item updated successfully, and over here it is showing batch 2. Now next we need to delete this record. So let's delete it. Make sure that you are selecting this one and clicking on delete. And now once you click on delete, we need to read the list again because it is not refreshing. So let's click on read. Now you will see it over here. It has loaded the item successfully and we are not getting that record. So guys, we have seen all operations: create, read, update, delete, and this is what I wanted to demonstrate you in this session. So let's wrap our session. So guys, in this session we have followed all the steps to integrate UI and service layer, where we have performed all these 10 tasks to achieve the complete functionality, and after that we have tested our application in the hosted workbench. And that is what I wanted to demonstrate you in this session. On this note, I am stopping over here. See you in the next session. Till then, bye bye, take care.